My wife wiped off our daughter's college fund and vanished with her new boyfriend. I was devastated until our 10-year-old smirked and said, "Dad, don't worry. I handled it." Days later, she called screaming after discovering. You know that feeling when something's off, but you can't quite put your finger on it? That's exactly how I felt walking up the driveway that Tuesday afternoon, keys jangling in my hand like some kind of twisted wind chime. I'd left work early. Hell, I've been doing that a lot lately, trying to spend more time with Ruby before she hit those teenage years where dads become the enemy. The Johnson account could wait another day. My family couldn't. I was humming that stupid tune from Ruby's favorite cartoon, some mindless jingle about friendship and rainbows that had been stuck in my head all week. She'd been obsessed with it lately, singing it while brushing her teeth, humming it over her cereal. It was one of those dad things. You hate the song, but you love hearing your kid happy, so you end up knowing every damn word. The house looked normal from the outside. Same red mailbox that needed painting, same potted plants Evelyn had been neglecting for months, same everything. But the second I stepped through that front door, I knew. The silence hit me like a brick wall. Not the comfortable quiet of an empty house, but something else entirely, something hollow and wrong. No backpack dumped by the door like Ruby always did, even though I'd told her a million times to put it in her room. No tiny sneakers kicked off and left wherever they landed. No sound of cartoons drifting from the living room or the distant chatter of Evelyn on one of her endless phone calls with her sister. Just nothing. I called out anyway, because that's what you do, right? "Hello? Ruby? Ev." My voice echoed back at me from the empty hallway, sounding pathetic and desperate, the kind of desperate you don't want to admit you're feeling. Room by room, I searched like some kind of detective in a bad movie. Kitchen, clean, too clean. Evelyn never left the kitchen this spotless. Living room, couch cushions perfectly arranged, no sign that anyone had been lounging there watching Netflix. Ruby's room, bed made, toys organized. When was the last time Ruby had made her bed without being asked? Never. That's when. My hands were already shaking when I pulled out my phone, though I didn't want to admit why. One notification. One text message from my wife of 13 years. 13 years of marriage. 15 years together total, if you counted the dating years. 15 years boiled down to a single message that made my blood run cold. "I'm leaving. Don't look for me. It's better this way." That's it. No explanation. No goodbye. No mention of Ruby or what this would do to our daughter. Just a quick, cold dismissal like she was canceling a dinner reservation instead of destroying our entire life. My first instinct was to call her, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the finality of those words, or maybe it was the sick feeling growing in my stomach that told me this was bigger than just a fight or a bad day. Instead, I opened our banking app with trembling fingers, praying I was wrong, praying this was all some misunderstanding. Zero balance. Not low zero. Completely cleaned out. I stared at that screen until the numbers blurred, refreshing it over and over like maybe the app was glitching. Maybe this was all some terrible mistake. But it wasn't. Every account, checking, savings, even the special account I'd been building for Ruby's college fund. $68,000 gone. Money I'd saved dollar by dollar, working overtime and skipping lunches, putting away whatever I could for my little girl's future. My vision went fuzzy around the edges, and I had to grab the kitchen counter to keep from falling over. This wasn't just leaving, this was theft. This was Evelyn taking everything we'd built and torching it on her way out the door. She'd stolen my daughter's future like it meant absolutely nothing. That's when I heard it, the soft whisper of the refrigerator door opening. I turned around, and there was Ruby, still in her school uniform, that little plaid skirt and white polo that made her look so young and innocent. She was holding a carton of chocolate milk, drinking straight from it like she always did when she thought I wasn't looking. "Ruby, sweetheart," I started, my voice cracking. How do you tell a 10-year-old that her mother just disappeared with her college fund? How do you explain that the woman who was supposed to protect her had betrayed her in the worst possible way? But Ruby just looked at me with those big brown eyes, Evelyn's eyes, though I tried not to think about that right now, and took another sip of her chocolate milk. She seemed calm, too calm for a kid whose world had just been turned upside down. "Dad," she said, setting the carton down on the counter with the kind of deliberate care that seemed way too mature for her age. "Don't worry about it." I blinked at her, confused. "Ruby, I need to tell you something about your mom." I know she left, Ruby interrupted, and there was something in her voice that made me stop cold. Not sadness, not confusion, not the devastation I'd expected from a 10-year-old whose mother had just abandoned her. Something else entirely. I handled it, she said simply, like she was talking about cleaning up spilled juice or finishing her homework. I stared at my daughter, this little girl in her school uniform with chocolate milk on her upper lip, and felt the world shift beneath my feet in a way that had nothing to do with Evelyn's betrayal. There was something in Ruby's eyes, a knowing, a confidence that didn't belong on the face of a child. What do you mean? You handled it, I whispered. Ruby just smiled. A small, secret smile that would haunt me for weeks to come. Sleep was a joke that night. I lay there staring at the ceiling, watching shadows from passing cars sweep across the room like searchlights, my mind running in circles like a hamster on a wheel from hell. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that banking app screen. Those cold, brutal zeros where our life savings used to be. 68 grand gone. Just like that. Money that represented years of sacrifice, skipped vacations, brown bag lunches, and saying no to Ruby when she wanted the expensive sneakers all her friends had. But it wasn't just the money that kept me awake. It was Ruby's reaction, or lack thereof. What kind of 10-year-old finds out her mother abandoned her and just shrugs it off like it's no big deal? What kind of kid says, I handled it, with that weird little smile, and goes back to drinking chocolate milk like the world hadn't just exploded? I kept thinking about all those parenting books I'd read when Ruby was little, all that advice about how kids process trauma differently than adults. Maybe she was in shock. Maybe the reality hadn't hit her yet. Maybe tomorrow she'd wake up crying for her mommy, and I'd have to figure out how to put the pieces back together for both of us. Around 3 in the morning, I finally gave up on sleep and padded down the hallway to check on her. The house felt different now, emptier, like Evelyn's absence had sucked something vital out of the walls themselves. I pushed Ruby's door open just a crack, expecting to find her curled up with Mr. Buttons, her raggedest stuffed elephant that she'd had since she was 2. Instead, I found her sitting cross-legged on her bed, still in her pajamas, hunched over her tablet like she was working on some kind of important project. The blue glow from the screen lit up her face, making her look older somehow, more serious than any kid should look at damn near 3 in the morning. Ruby, I whispered, stepping into the room. Sweetheart, what are you doing up? She looked up at me with those big brown eyes, completely alert like she'd been awake for hours. Couldn't sleep either, huh, Dad? She said, and there was something almost sympathetic in her voice, like she was the adult comforting the child instead of the other way around. I sat down on the edge of her bed, the mattress creaking under my weight. What are you working on, baby girl? It's way past bedtime. Just organizing some stuff, she said, but she didn't close the tablet or try to hide what she was doing. Instead, she turned the screen toward me slightly, and I could see what looked like files and folders, all neatly labeled and organized like some kind of digital filing cabinet. That's when the worry really started creeping in. This wasn't normal kid behavior. Normal kids played games on their tablets, watched YouTube videos about slime making, or whatever weird trend was popular that week. They didn't organize files at 3 in the morning like tiny accountants. Ruby, I said gently, trying to keep my voice calm and reassuring. What did you mean earlier when you said you handled it? Handled what exactly? She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tapping against the tablet screen in a rhythm that reminded me uncomfortably of Evelyn when she was thinking hard about something. Finally, she looked up at me with an expression that was way too mature for her 10-year-old face. I knew she was planning something, Dad, Ruby said, her voice matter-of-fact like she was discussing the weather. Mom, I've been keeping track. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Keeping track of what, sweetheart? Ruby set the tablet down carefully, like it contained something precious and fragile. Her behavior, her lies, the way she started acting different. She paused, studying my face like she was trying to figure out how much I could handle. I knew she was going to leave us. I felt like I was drowning, like the air had suddenly gotten too thick to breathe. My 10-year-old daughter, my baby girl who still slept with a stuffed elephant and cried when we ran over roadkill, had been monitoring her own mother like some kind of tiny private investigator. Ruby, I don't understand. What do you mean you've been keeping track? She picked up the tablet again and opened what looked like a folder. I made files, she said simply. Lots of files. About all the weird stuff Mom's been doing. What kind of weird stuff? I asked, though part of me wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. Ruby's fingers moved across the screen with the kind of confidence that made my stomach twist. Like how she started taking longer showers and using different perfume. How she'd leave the house for hours and come back with receipts from places she never went. How she'd get text messages and hide her phone when you were around. Each word felt like another nail in the coffin of my marriage. Confirmation of suspicions I'd been trying to ignore for months. But hearing it from my daughter, my child who should have been worried about homework and playground drama, made it 1,000 times worse. Ruby, I said carefully, how long have you been watching your mom like this? She shrugged, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Since Christmas, maybe? That's when she started acting really weird. Like, fake nice to you, but mean to me when you weren't looking. My heart broke a little more. Evelyn had been cruel to Ruby behind my back, and I'd been too blind or too busy to notice. What kind of father was I? Show me, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Ruby looked at me for a long moment, like she was deciding whether I was ready for whatever she was about to reveal. Then she pulled up a folder on her tablet, and I saw the title that made my blood run cold. Mom's Secret Files. Dad, Ruby said quietly, there's a lot you don't know. I thought I knew what betrayal felt like. I thought discovering Evelyn had cleaned out our bank accounts was rock bottom. But sitting there on my daughter's bed at 3 in the morning, watching her methodically open file after file of evidence against her own mother, I realized I hadn't even scratched the surface of how deep this rabbit hole went. Ruby's fingers moved across the tablet screen with the precision of someone who'd been doing this for months. Each tap revealed another layer of deception, another piece of a puzzle I'd been too stupid or too trusting to see coming together. The folder titled Mom's Secret Files opened up like Pandora's box, and what spilled out made my stomach twist into knots. Here, Ruby said, her voice eerily calm as she pulled up the first screenshot. These are text messages between Mom and some guy named Travis. The image on the screen showed a conversation that made my blood boil. Evelyn's contact name at the top, and below it, messages that read like something out of a cheating spouse handbook. Can't wait to see you tonight, from Evelyn. Hotel room is booked under Johnson, from this Travis guy. Make sure he doesn't suspect anything, from my wife of 13 years. Jesus Christ, I whispered, forgetting for a moment that I was talking to a 10-year-old. There's more, Ruby said matter-of-factly, swiping to the next screenshot. A lot more. She wasn't kidding. Message after message scrolled past, each one worse than the last. Evelyn complaining about me, calling me clueless and pathetic. Evelyn talking about how she couldn't wait to get out of this dump and start over somewhere warm. And then, the ones that really made my vision go red. Messages where she talked about Ruby like she was some kind of burden, some inconvenience she couldn't wait to leave behind. She called me a brat, Ruby said quietly, pointing to one particular message. Said I was too nosy for my own good and that Travis didn't want kids around anyway. I wanted to grab that tablet and throw it across the room. I wanted to punch something, scream at the ceiling, call Evelyn, and tell her exactly what I thought of her and her piece of shit boyfriend. But Ruby was watching me with those big brown eyes, waiting to see how I'd react, and I knew I had to keep it together for her sake. How did you get these, sweetheart? I asked, my voice strained. Ruby's expression didn't change. Mom never changed her password after she got her new phone last year. It's still Champagne 2020. You know, from that New Year's Eve when she got really drunk and kept saying it was going to be her year. I remembered that night. Evelyn had been so optimistic, so full of plans for the future. Our future, I thought. Apparently, I'd been wrong about that too. But Ruby, you can't just go through someone's phone. She went through mine all the time, Ruby interrupted, and there was a flash of something harder in her voice. She read my diary. She checked my browser history. She even went through my backpack looking for notes from friends. So yeah, I went through her stuff too. Fair point, I had to admit. And right now, I was grateful she had. Ruby swiped to the next section of her digital evidence collection. These are emails, she said. Between Mom and Travis, but also some other people. Look at this one. The email thread she showed me was between Evelyn and someone at a travel agency. Flight confirmations for 2 passengers, departing 3 days ago. The day after she'd cleaned out our accounts. Destination, Miami, Florida. One-way tickets. She booked the flights 2 weeks ago, Ruby explained. Same day, she made that big withdrawal from the joint savings account. Remember when she said she needed $5,000 for her sister's emergency? I remembered. Evelyn's sister Karen had supposedly needed money for some medical procedure. I thought it was weird that she'd asked Evelyn instead of her husband, but I trusted my wife. Like an idiot. Karen never had any emergency, Ruby continued. I checked her Facebook. She was posting pictures from her vacation in California the whole week. Mom said she was sick. My daughter was turning into a better detective than half the cops I knew. It should have made me proud. Instead, it made me sick that she'd had to become this way. Ruby pulled up another file, and this one made my hands shake. Bank statements, withdrawal slips, transfer receipts. All with what looked like my signature at the bottom. I think she used your signature on these, Ruby said, pointing to the documents. See how the M in your last name looks different? She practiced it on the back of old grocery receipts. I found them in her purse. I stared at the forged documents. Thousands of dollars moved out of our accounts bit by bit over the course of months. Small amounts at first, then bigger ones as she got bolder. Money I'd never authorized her to take. Money I'd never even known was missing until it was too late. Ruby, I said, my voice barely a whisper. How long have you been collecting all this? She looked down at her tablet, scrolling through what looked like dozens more files. Since January. That's when I noticed she started deleting her text messages every night. Normal people don't do that, Dad. Normal people don't have secrets that big. I pulled my daughter into a hug, holding her tight against my chest while my mind raced. She felt so small in my arms, so young despite everything she'd been through, everything she'd figured out on her own. I backed up everything before she left, Ruby said, her voice muffled against my shoulder. All of it. Every message, every email, every fake document. I saved it all. Why? I asked. Why did you do all this? Ruby pulled back and looked at me with eyes that seemed far too old for her face. Because somebody had to protect us, Dad. And it wasn't going to be her. The next few days passed in a weird kind of haze, like I was living in someone else's life and just waiting for the real owner to come back and reclaim it. I called in sick to work. First time I'd done that in 3 years, because I couldn't imagine sitting in meetings and pretending everything was normal when my world had just imploded. Ruby went to school like nothing had happened, which should have been reassuring, but somehow made me more worried. What kind of kid maintains perfect attendance after her mother abandons her? Every morning, she'd eat her cereal, brush her teeth, grab her backpack, and head out to catch the bus like it was just another Tuesday. Every afternoon, she'd come home, do her homework at the kitchen table, and then disappear into her room with that damn tablet. I'd hear her typing away in there for hours, the soft click-click-click of her fingers against the screen mixing with the sound of my own thoughts spiraling out of control. On the third day, I couldn't take it anymore. I knocked on her door around dinner time, expecting to find her playing some game or watching YouTube videos like a normal 10-year-old. Instead, I found her surrounded by printouts, pages and pages of documents spread across her bed like she was running some kind of command center. Ruby, what is all this? I asked, stepping carefully around the papers scattered on her floor. She looked up from her tablet with that same eerily calm expression she'd been wearing since this whole nightmare started. Evidence, she said simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. I'm organizing everything so it makes sense. I picked up one of the papers. It was a timeline, written in Ruby's careful 10-year-old handwriting, documenting every suspicious thing Evelyn had done over the past 6 months. January 15th. Mom starts taking phone calls in the garage. February 3rd. Mom buys new underwear, hides the receipt. March 20th. Mom comes home smelling like different soap, says she went to the grocery store but forgot to buy groceries. Jesus, Ruby, I breathed, scanning the timeline. There were dozens of entries, each one a small red flag that I'd been too blind or too trusting to notice. You've been watching her this whole time? Someone had to, Ruby said matter-of-factly. She was lying about everything, Dad. Where she went, who she talked to, what she was doing with our money. I knew something bad was going to happen. I sat down heavily on her desk chair, feeling like the world's biggest failure as a husband and father. Why didn't you tell me? Ruby was quiet for a long moment, organizing her papers into neat piles. Would you have believed me? She asked finally. If I'd come to you 6 months ago and said Mom was cheating and stealing money, would you have listened to a 10-year-old? The honest answer was probably no. I would have thought Ruby was being dramatic, maybe acting out because of some normal kid jealousy. I would have told her that grown-ups sometimes have problems, but that didn't mean anything terrible was happening. I would have been completely, utterly wrong. Tell me about this timeline, I said instead, because I couldn't deal with that particular guilt spiral right now. Ruby pulled up a digital version on her tablet, more detailed than the handwritten one. It started in December, actually. Remember when Mom said she joined that book club? The one that met every Tuesday night. I nodded. Evelyn had been excited about it. Said she needed to get out of the house more, meet some new people. I'd encouraged her, thought it was healthy. There is no book club, Ruby continued. I called the library where she said they met. They don't have any book clubs on Tuesday nights. Never have. Of course they didn't. I felt like an idiot. So I started paying attention to everything, Ruby went on. Every lie, every excuse, every weird thing she did. Like how she'd always come home from her book club smelling like hotel shampoo instead of the soap we have at home. Or how she started doing her own laundry instead of throwing it in with ours. Or how she'd get text messages at dinner and smile in this gross way she never smiled at us. Each revelation was like another punch to the gut. My wife had been living a double life right under my nose, and my 10-year-old daughter had been the only one smart enough to figure it out. What about the money? I asked. When did you realize she was stealing from us? Ruby pulled up another file on her tablet. March. That's when I learned how to check our bank account online. How did you? Never mind. I probably don't want to know. Your password is Ruby's birthday plus our address, she said with a slight smile. You're not very creative, Dad. Fair enough. So you've been monitoring our finances for months? Just the big stuff. I set up alerts so I'd know when large amounts got moved around. When Mom took that $5,000 for Aunt Karen's emergency, I knew it was bullshit because I'd already checked Karen's social media. She was posting pictures from Disneyland that whole week. I was starting to understand just how deep Ruby's investigation had gone. This wasn't some kid playing detective. This was a systematic surveillance operation that would have impressed actual law enforcement. But here's the thing, Dad, Ruby said, and there was something different in her voice now. Something that sounded almost excited. I didn't just collect evidence. I made a plan. What kind of plan? Ruby grinned, the first real smile I'd seen from her since this whole mess started. Remember how I said I sent everything to Aunt Molly? Your sister, the lawyer? Well, I didn't just send her the files. I sent her a 4-step recovery plan for getting our money back and making sure Mom can't hurt us anymore. I stared at my daughter, this incredible, terrifying, brilliant little person who shared my DNA, but seemed to have gotten all the brains I'd missed out on. Aunt Molly's coming over tomorrow, Ruby continued. She says we've got a really good case for fraud and theft. She also says I should consider law school when I grow up. I laughed despite everything. Actually laughed for the first time in days. Ruby, you're 10 years old. Yeah, she said, going back to organizing her papers. But I'm a 10-year-old who just caught a thief and built a legal case against her. Age is just a number, Dad. Looking at my daughter surrounded by evidence of her mother's betrayal, calmly planning our counterattack like some kind of pint-sized prosecutor, I realized something that both terrified and amazed me. Ruby wasn't just handling this situation. She was 3 steps ahead of everyone else, including me. Molly showed up at exactly 9 in the morning, because that's the kind of person my sister is. Punctual, professional, and armed with enough legal firepower to level a small building. I watched her pull into our driveway in her sleek black BMW, briefcase in one hand and a laptop bag slung over her shoulder like she was heading into battle. Which, I guess she was. She'd always been the successful one in our family, the one who got the brains and the ambition while I got the nice personality and a steady job in middle management. Molly had worked her ass off through law school, landed a position at one of the biggest corporate firms in the state, and spent the last 15 years climbing the ladder until she was pulling down more money in a year than I made in 3. We didn't talk much, different worlds and all that, but when the chips were down, she was family. You look like hell, she said by way of greeting, giving me a quick hug on the front porch. Thanks, that's exactly what I needed to hear, I replied, but I was genuinely glad to see her. Molly had this way of making everything seem manageable, like any problem could be solved with the right paperwork and enough billable hours. Where's the mastermind? She asked, stepping into the house and looking around like she was assessing the crime scene. Ruby's in her room, organizing her files, I said. She's been at it since 6 this morning. Molly raised an eyebrow. 6 in the morning? On a Saturday? Yeah, she doesn't really sleep much anymore. I think she's afraid something else might happen if she's not paying attention. Understandable, Molly said, setting her briefcase down on the kitchen table with a solid thunk. Can you get her? We need to talk strategy. I called for Ruby, and she appeared in the doorway a few seconds later, tablet in hand as usual. She looked tiny standing next to Molly's power suit and perfectly styled hair, but there was something in her posture that reminded me of my sister. That same focused intensity, that same sense of purpose. Ruby, Molly said, crouching down to Ruby's eye level. Your dad told me you've been doing some detective work. Ruby nodded seriously. I sent you everything last night. Did you get a chance to look at it? Molly straightened up and opened her laptop. I did. And I have to say, kiddo, your work is better than half the paralegals at my firm. She turned the screen toward us, showing what looked like a legal document covered in official-looking letterhead. I've already filed a fraud report with the bank based on your evidence. The forged signatures alone are enough to get their attention. What does that mean? I asked. It means they're freezing any accounts connected to Evelyn's social security number while they investigate, Molly explained. If she tries to access money she stole from you, red flags will go up immediately. It also means they'll be looking into every transaction she made in the past 6 months. Ruby's eyes lit up. What about Travis? The guy she's with? Molly's smile was sharp as a knife. That's where things get interesting. Based on the information you provided, I was able to do some digging on Mr. Travis Morrison. Turns out he's got quite a bit to lose if this gets out. She pulled up another document on her laptop. Travis is a certified financial advisor with a big firm downtown. He's also married with 2 kids and lives in a very nice house in the suburbs. I sent copies of all your evidence to his employer's ethics board and their internal affairs department. Financial advisors take a dim view of colleagues who help clients commit fraud. I felt a grim satisfaction wash over me. So he's screwed. Oh, he's more than screwed, Molly said. I also sent an anonymous package to his wife. Text messages, hotel receipts, the works. By now, she knows exactly what kind of man she married. Ruby was practically bouncing on her toes. What about getting our money back? Can we do that? That's where your 4-step plan comes in, Molly said, pulling out a legal pad covered in notes. I have to admit, Ruby, when your dad said his 10-year-old daughter had sent me a legal strategy, I was expecting something cute but useless. Instead, you sent me one of the most comprehensive fraud recovery plans I've ever seen. She flipped through her notes. Step 1 was documenting everything, which you did brilliantly. Step 2 was reporting it to the authorities, done. Step 3 was freezing assets, also done. But step 4 is where you really impressed me. What's step 4? I asked. Ruby grinned. Making it hurt. Molly laughed, actually laughed out loud. That's exactly what she wrote. Step 4. Make it hurt so bad they never try this shit again. I've never seen that particular legal term in a strategy document before, but I like the sentiment. Language, Ruby, I said automatically, though honestly, after what Evelyn had put us through, she'd earned the right to a little profanity. The beauty of Ruby's plan, Molly continued, is that it doesn't just focus on getting your money back. It focuses on making sure Evelyn and Travis face real consequences for what they did. Public consequences. The kind that follow you around for years. She pulled out another set of documents. I've filed complaints with the Better Business Bureau, reported the credit card fraud to all 3 credit agencies, and submitted documentation to the IRS about unreported income, because I guarantee you neither of them declared their little theft ring on their tax returns. Is all this legal? I asked, because my sister's smile was starting to look a little scary. Completely legal, Molly assured me. Everything we're doing is documented, justified, and well within the bounds of the law. We're not seeking revenge, we're seeking justice. There's a difference. Ruby was taking notes on her tablet while Molly talked. What about the house in Florida? The one they rented with our money? Already handled, Molly said. I contacted their landlord with documentation showing the money they used for the deposit was stolen. The lease has been voided, and they've been evicted. They have 48 hours to get out. I stared at my sister in amazement. How did you get all this done so fast? I have a good team, she said modestly. And your daughter provided me with enough evidence to make this an open and shut case. Plus, I may have mentioned to a few people that this involves a 10-year-old girl whose college fund was stolen by her own mother. People tend to get motivated when kids are involved. Ruby looked up from her tablet. So what happens now? Molly closed her laptop and looked at both of us seriously. Now we wait for them to realize their new life just fell apart. Based on what Ruby documented, they're not the brightest bulbs in the box. They'll probably try to contact you within the next few days, either begging for mercy or trying to blame someone else. And when they do? I asked. Ruby answered before Molly could. We don't give them anything. No mercy, no second chances, no let's work this out like adults. They made their choice. Molly nodded approvingly. Listen to your daughter. She's got good instincts. Looking at my sister and my daughter sitting at our kitchen table, surrounded by legal documents and evidence files, I realized something that should have been terrifying, but was actually kind of comforting. I wasn't fighting this battle alone anymore. The call came at 6:23 a.m. on a Wednesday, 3 days after Molly had finished filing all the paperwork and setting our legal trap in motion. I was making coffee in the kitchen, trying to pretend I wasn't jumping every time my phone buzzed, when Evelyn's name popped up on the screen. My hands were shaking as I answered, and I had to clear my throat twice before I could speak. Hello, Evelyn. The voice that came through the speaker was nothing like the calm, controlled woman who'd sent me that cold goodbye text. This was panic in its purest form, high-pitched, breathless, and absolutely terrified. What the hell did you do? She screamed, and I had to hold the phone away from my ear. What the fuck did you do to me? I looked over at Ruby, who was calmly eating her cereal at the kitchen table like nothing unusual was happening. She glanced up at me and gave me a little thumbs up, which would have been funny if this whole situation wasn't so completely insane. I didn't do anything, Evelyn, I said, keeping my voice as steady as possible. I'm just trying to figure out how to explain to our daughter why her mother abandoned her and stole her college fund. Don't you dare try to pin this on me, she shrieked. You froze my accounts. You got me evicted. You ruined everything. That's when I realized Molly's plan was working even better than we'd hoped. In less than a week, Evelyn's perfect new life had completely collapsed, and she was starting to understand that actions have consequences. The condo, David, she continued, her voice getting more hysterical by the second. We were supposed to sign the lease yesterday, and they said our deposit check bounced. The money's gone. All of it. I felt a savage satisfaction hearing the desperation in her voice. What money, Evelyn? You mean the money you stole from our joint accounts? The money you took from Ruby's college fund. It wasn't stealing, she screamed. That was my money too. I earned it. By doing what? I shot back, my own anger finally breaking through. By lying to me for months? By forging my signature on bank documents? By cheating on me with some sleazeball financial advisor? There was a long silence on the other end, and for a moment I thought she'd hung up. Then I heard her crying, not the delicate, manipulative tears she used to pull when she wanted something, but ugly, desperate sobs that told me she was finally starting to understand how completely screwed she was. The car's gone too, she said between sobs. They repossessed Travis's BMW this morning. Said something about fraudulent loan applications. We're stuck in this shitty motel with nowhere to go and no money. That's rough, I said, and I meant it to sound sarcastic. But honestly, part of me was starting to feel a little bad for her. Emphasis on little. You don't understand, Evelyn continued, her voice getting more frantic. They fired Travis. His wife threw him out. His kids won't even talk to him. Everything's falling apart. Ruby looked up from her cereal again and made a little, give me the phone gesture. I shook my head. This was between adults, no matter how much of a strategic genius my 10-year-old had become. But Ruby was insistent, standing up and walking over to me with that determined look she got when she'd made up her mind about something. Let me talk to her, Dad, she said quietly. Please. I looked at my daughter, this little girl who'd been forced to grow up way too fast, who'd had to protect our family because the adult who was supposed to do that job had betrayed us instead. After everything Evelyn had put her through, Ruby deserved to have her say. I held out the phone. Ruby wants to talk to you. Ruby. Evelyn's voice immediately shifted, becoming softer, more manipulative. Oh, honey, is that really you? Mommy misses you so much. This is all just a big misunderstanding, baby girl. Mommy's going to come home and fix everything, okay? Ruby took the phone with both hands, holding it like it was something precious and fragile. When she spoke, her voice was calm and clear, without a trace of the emotion I knew she had to be feeling. "You shouldn't have used my college fund, Mom." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I could practically hear Evelyn's brain trying to process the fact that her 10-year-old daughter wasn't buying her bullshit. "Ruby, sweetheart," Evelyn said finally, "Mommy didn't mean for this to happen. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, and—" "It wasn't a mistake," Ruby interrupted, her voice still perfectly steady. "You planned it for months. I have all the evidence. The text messages, the emails, the fake bank documents. I know about Travis, and I know about the lies you told Dad, and I know you called me a brat who was too dumb to notice what you were doing." Another long silence. Then Evelyn's voice, smaller now, more uncertain. You went through my phone?" "You went through mine," Ruby replied matter-of-factly. "You read my diary and checked my browser history and went through my backpack looking for notes from friends. So yeah, I went through your stuff too. Turns out you're not as smart as you thought you were." I watched my daughter hold that phone, completely calm and in control, while her mother fell apart on the other end. It should have been heartbreaking, a child having to be the adult in a conversation with her own parent. Instead, I felt nothing but fierce pride. "Ruby, please," Evelyn begged, and now she really was crying. "You have to tell your father to stop this. Tell him to unfreeze the accounts. Tell him we can work this out. I'm your mother." Ruby looked up at me, and in her eyes I saw something that was both terrible and beautiful. The moment when a child realizes that being someone's parent doesn't automatically make you worthy of respect or forgiveness. "This is what you get for calling me too dumb to notice," Ruby said simply. Then she hung up the phone and handed it back to me with a little shrug. "Told you I handled it, Dad." The thing about Ruby that I was starting to understand is that she didn't just solve problems. She obliterated them so completely that they could never come back to bite us. While I was still processing the emotional fallout of Evelyn's panicked phone call, my 10-year-old daughter was already 3 moves ahead, systematically destroying the life of a man I'd never even met, but had come to hate with every fiber of my being. "Dad," Ruby said that afternoon, looking up from her tablet with that familiar expression of quiet satisfaction. "Want to see what I found out about Travis?" We were sitting in the living room, me with a beer I probably shouldn't have been drinking at 3 in the afternoon, Ruby with her homework spread out on the coffee table like she was just another normal kid doing normal kid things. Except nothing about this situation was normal, and my daughter was definitely not like other kids. "What kind of stuff?" I asked, though part of me wasn't sure I wanted to know. Ruby's research skills had proven to be both thorough and slightly terrifying. She turned her tablet toward me, showing what looked like a professional LinkedIn profile. The photo showed a guy in his 40s with perfectly styled hair and the kind of fake smile that screamed, "Trust me with your life savings." Travis Morrison, Certified Financial Advisor, Morrison and Associates Financial Planning. A real pillar of the community, apparently. "Travis isn't just some random guy Mom met at a bar," Ruby explained, scrolling through his profile. "He's a big deal financial advisor with his own firm. He manages retirement accounts for like half the people in Riverside County." "Okay," I said slowly. "And that's important because—" Ruby's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Because people who manage other people's money aren't supposed to help their girlfriends commit fraud. It's like, really against the rules." She pulled up another screen, this one showing what looked like a professional ethics complaint form, already filled out and submitted. I sent all of Mom's text messages to the California Department of Financial Protection and Innovation. You know, the ones where Travis talks about helping her move money around and make it look legitimate. My jaw dropped. "Ruby, you can't just file official complaints with government agencies. You're 10 years old." "I didn't lie about my age," she said defensively. "I just didn't mention it. Besides, the evidence speaks for itself. Look at this." She showed me a series of text messages between Evelyn and Travis that I hadn't seen before, ones that made my stomach turn. Travis giving Evelyn advice on how to forge bank documents. Travis suggesting she withdraw money in small amounts to avoid triggering fraud alerts. Travis actually bragging about how he'd helped other clients restructure their assets during divorces. "This guy's a professional," I said, reading through the messages. "He's done this before." "That's what I thought too," Ruby said. So I did some more digging. What she'd found was worse than I'd imagined. Travis Morrison wasn't just a cheating husband and financial fraudster. He was a serial predator who'd been using his position to target vulnerable married women for years. Ruby had somehow tracked down 3 other women who'd had affairs with Travis, women who'd ended up losing money, losing their marriages, and in one case, losing custody of their kids. "How did you find all this?" I asked, scrolling through what looked like a comprehensive dossier on Travis's past victims. "Facebook groups," Ruby said matter-of-factly. "There are these private groups where women share stories about guys who scammed them. I messaged a few people, told them I was doing research on financial fraud for a school project. They were really helpful once they realized I was trying to stop someone from getting hurt." I stared at my daughter, this 10-year-old who was casually discussing online investigation techniques like she was some kind of junior FBI agent. "Ruby, some of this stuff? It's pretty heavy for a kid your age." She shrugged. "Mom made it heavy when she decided to steal my college fund and run off with a con artist. I'm just making sure he can't do it to anyone else." And that's when I realized what Ruby had really done. She hadn't just exposed Travis's affair with Evelyn. She'd blown up his entire operation. The ethics complaints, the evidence of fraud, the connections to other victims, it was all going to come out. Travis Morrison's career was over, his reputation was destroyed, and anyone who'd trusted him with their money was going to find out exactly what kind of man he really was. "There's more," Ruby said, pulling up what looked like a local news website. "I sent everything to Channel 7's investigative team. You know, that lady who does the Problem Solver segment? She called me yesterday." "She called you? On your cell phone?" "Yeah. I gave her my number when I submitted the story. She wants to do a piece on financial advisors who prey on married women. She said it's going to air next week." I felt dizzy. "Ruby, you can't just..." My phone rang, cutting me off. Unknown number, but I answered it anyway because at this point, nothing could surprise me anymore. "Hello. Is this David?" The voice was male, shaky, desperate. "This is Travis Morrison. I think we need to talk." Ruby looked up from her tablet, her eyes bright with interest. I put the phone on speaker without even thinking about it. "What do you want, Travis?" "Look, man, I know you're pissed, and I get it, okay? But this has gone too far. Your kid, she's destroying my life. My wife left me, my business is ruined, and now there are reporters calling my office asking about fraud allegations." "Good," I said simply. "Good." Travis's voice cracked. "Dude, I have 2 kids of my own. They're not going to have a father anymore because of what your daughter did." Ruby leaned forward toward the phone, and when she spoke, her voice was cold as ice. "You should have thought about that before you helped my mom steal my college fund," she said. "Maybe your kids will learn something from this. Like how not to be a piece of shit when they grow up." "Jesus Christ," Travis whispered. "She's just a kid. How is she doing this?" "Because someone had to," Ruby replied. "And it wasn't going to be you." The line went dead. Ruby looked up at me with that same satisfied smile she'd been wearing since this whole thing started. "One down," she said cheerfully. "Now let's see what happens when Mom realizes she's dating an unemployed felon." I looked at my daughter, this tiny, brilliant, terrifying person who'd just destroyed a grown man's life with nothing but a tablet and an internet connection, and realized I was probably looking at the future of justice in America. It was beautiful and absolutely fucking scary at the same time. The Travis Morrison story hit Channel 7's evening news exactly 1 week later, and it was everything Ruby had promised it would be, a devastating expose that didn't just destroy one man's career, but shined a spotlight on a problem nobody had been talking about. Financial predators, when trust becomes theft, was the kind of investigative piece that wins awards and ruins lives, and my 10-year-old daughter had basically written the whole thing herself. We watched it together on the couch. Ruby with her homework spread out on her lap like this was just another Tuesday night. Me with a beer that had gone warm because I couldn't stop staring at the television. The reporter, Sandra Chun, a woman who'd made her career out of exposing corruption, laid out Travis's pattern of targeting married women, helping them hide assets from their husbands, and then disappearing with the money when things got complicated. "The investigation began," Sandra said, looking directly into the camera, "when a 10-year-old girl in Riverside noticed her college fund had been stolen and decided to do something about it. They didn't use Ruby's name, something about protecting minors, but they showed her silhouette answering questions with the kind of calm confidence that made her sound like she was 30 instead of 10. The segment ended with Travis's mugshot and the news that he'd been arrested on multiple counts of fraud, elder abuse, and conspiracy to commit theft. Not bad for a Tuesday, Ruby said, closing her math book and stretching like she'd just finished any other homework assignment. That's when my phone started buzzing. Text messages, emails, missed calls, all from numbers I didn't recognize. At first I thought it was reporters wanting to follow up on the story, but when I started reading the messages, I realized it was something else entirely. "Dad, my tablet's going crazy too," Ruby said, looking at her screen with wide eyes. "I'm getting messages from kids all over the place." The first message I opened was from someone named Maria in Phoenix. I saw the news story. "My stepdad took $15,000 from my savings account last year and said it was for family expenses. I never knew I could do anything about it. Can you help me figure out how to check my accounts?" Another one from a kid named Jake in Denver. "My mom's boyfriend convinced her to borrow from my trust fund to invest in his business. The business failed, and now he says we can't get the money back because it's too complicated. I'm only 14, but I want to learn how to protect myself." Within an hour, Ruby had received over 50 messages from kids across the country. Kids whose parents or step-parents or guardians had stolen from them. Kids who'd thought they were powerless to do anything about it. Kids who'd seen Ruby's story and realized they weren't alone. "This is insane," I said, reading message after message of heartbreaking stories. "How are there so many kids dealing with this?" Ruby was already pulling up her laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard with that focused intensity she got when she was solving a problem. "Because nobody talks about it, Dad. Kids don't know they have rights when it comes to money. Parents and step-parents and whoever else just take what they want because they think kids can't stop them." She was building something. I could see it happening in real time. What had started as Ruby protecting our family was turning into something bigger, something that could help kids everywhere who were being victimized by the adults who were supposed to protect them. "What are you going to do?" I asked. Ruby looked up from her laptop with that familiar, determined expression. "I'm going to teach them what I learned. How to check bank accounts, how to document evidence, how to find help when the grown-ups won't listen." Over the next few days, Ruby's operation expanded in ways that left me both proud and slightly terrified. She'd created a private Facebook group called Protect Your College Fund, where kids could safely share their stories and get advice. She'd connected with Molly and a network of volunteer attorneys who were willing to help kids navigate the legal system. She'd even partnered with that Sandrichin reporter to create a resource guide for financial abuse victims. The kid from Texas, Luis, turned out to be 15, and his dad had been systematically emptying his inheritance from his deceased mother to fund a gambling addiction. Ruby walked him through filing a police report and connected him with a legal aid society in Houston. The girl from Chicago, Aisha, was only 12, but she'd discovered her stepfather was using her social security number to open credit cards. Ruby helped her understand identity theft laws and put her in touch with credit monitoring services. Every evening after school, Ruby would sit at the kitchen table with her tablet and laptop, fielding messages from kids who needed help, organizing resources, and building what was essentially a support network for children being financially abused by their own families. "I can't believe how many kids this is happening to," I said one night, watching her respond to yet another desperate message. Ruby looked up from her screen, and for a moment she looked every bit the 10-year-old she was, tired, a little overwhelmed, but still determined to keep going. "Someone has to help them, Dad," she said simply. "And if the grown-ups won't do it, then I guess it's up to us kids." That's when I realized Ruby hadn't just solved our problem with Evelyn. She'd started a revolution. The call from Good Morning America came on a Thursday, 2 weeks after Ruby's support network had grown to over 300 kids across 47 states. I was making pancakes when my phone rang, and the voice on the other end introduced herself as a producer for the show's Human Interest segment. "We'd like to interview Ruby about her work helping children protect themselves from financial abuse," she said, like she was talking about interviewing a PhD instead of a fifth grader who still needed help reaching things on high shelves. My first instinct was to say no. Ruby had been through enough, and the last thing I wanted was to put her on national television where millions of people could judge her or our family situation. But when I mentioned it to Ruby over breakfast, her eyes lit up in a way I hadn't seen since before Evelyn left. "Dad, this could help so many more kids," she said, syrup dripping from her fork as she gestured excitedly. If I go on TV, kids everywhere will know they don't have to just take it when adults steal from them. Molly drove down from LA for the interview, partly to provide legal support, but mostly, I think, because she wanted to see her niece make television history. The crew set up in our living room, transforming our normal suburban space into something that looked like a professional studio with all their lights and cameras and sound equipment. Ruby sat in her favorite chair, the big blue one where she did her homework every day, wearing the dress we'd bought for her last school concert. She looked so small surrounded by all that professional equipment, but when the cameras started rolling, something amazing happened. My nervous 10-year-old transformed into someone who seemed years older, someone who spoke with the kind of quiet authority that made grown adults lean forward and listen. Ruby, the interviewer began, can you tell us how this all started? My mom stole my college fund and ran away with her boyfriend, Ruby said matter-of-factly, like she was discussing the weather. She thought I was too dumb to notice, but I'd been watching her lie and steal for months. When she left, I decided to do something about it. The interviewer, a veteran journalist who'd probably interviewed presidents and movie stars, looked genuinely impressed by Ruby's composure. That must have been very difficult for you. How did you know what to do? Ruby shrugged, a gesture that somehow managed to be both childlike and wise at the same time. I didn't at first, but I figured if adults could steal from kids and get away with it, there had to be adults who could help kids fight back. I just had to find them. And now you're helping other children in similar situations? Not every parent protects their kid, Ruby said, looking directly into the camera with those big brown eyes that had always been too smart for her own good. Sometimes the kid has to protect themselves, and sometimes they need help figuring out how. She talked about Luis from Texas, whose father had stolen his inheritance, and how they'd worked together to get it back through the legal system. She mentioned Aisha from Chicago, who discovered her stepfather was using her identity to rack up debt, and how Ruby had connected her with credit monitoring services and legal aid. The interviewer asked about the website Ruby had created, about the network of volunteer lawyers Molly had helped her organize, about the resource guides she'd written for kids who found themselves in impossible situations. What would you say to other children who might be watching this and dealing with similar problems? The interviewer asked. Ruby was quiet for a moment, thinking carefully about her answer. When she spoke, her voice was steady and sure. I'd tell them that just because someone is your parent or your guardian doesn't mean they get to steal from you. Money that belongs to you, college funds, inheritance, savings accounts. That's yours, not theirs. And if they take it, there are people who will help you get it back. You just have to be brave enough to ask for help. The interview aired 3 days later, and within hours, Ruby's website had crashed from all the traffic. By the end of the week, she'd received over 1,000 messages from kids, parents, teachers, and social workers around the country. But the message that mattered most came from an unknown number, left as a voicemail while we were having dinner. You ruined everything, Evelyn's voice said, shaking with rage and desperation. You destroyed my life, you little brat. I hope you're happy. Ruby listened to the message, then calmly deleted it and blocked the number. Yeah, she said, going back to her spaghetti. I am happy. 6 months. That's how long it took for Ruby to transform from a 10-year-old kid whose mom abandoned her into a national advocate for children's financial rights. 6 months for our lives to completely change, for the better in ways I never could have imagined when I first walked into that silent house and found those devastating zeros in our bank account. The bank recovery exceeded everyone's expectations. We got back 82% of what Evelyn had stolen, plus interest and penalties that she'd have to pay if she ever surfaced again. Ruby's college fund was not only restored but actually grew, thanks to donations from people who'd heard our story and wanted to help. The extra money went straight into the nonprofit Molly had helped Ruby establish, the Ruby Morrison Foundation for Financial Justice. What started as my daughter's personal mission for revenge had become something much bigger, a legitimate organization with real legal backing, staffed by volunteer attorneys and funded by people who understood that kids needed protection from the adults who were supposed to care for them. Ruby still ran the day-to-day operations from our kitchen table, but now she had help from social workers, financial advisors, and even a few reformed accountants who wanted to use their skills for good instead of evil. Evelyn disappeared somewhere in Arizona after Travis got arrested, and their dream life in Florida fell apart completely. We heard through the grapevine that she was working at a diner in Tucson, living in a studio apartment, and driving a beat-up Honda that barely ran. She tried reaching out a few more times. Desperate voicemails, pathetic text messages begging for forgiveness. But Ruby had blocked her number permanently after that last bitter message. She made her choice. Ruby told me when I asked if she ever missed her mom. She chose Travis and stolen money over us. I'm not going to waste time feeling sorry for someone who didn't feel sorry for me. Travis himself was serving 18 months in minimum security prison and would probably never work in finance again. His ex-wife had taken the kids and moved across the country. The house, the BMW, the fancy lifestyle, all gone. Ruby kept his mugshot saved on her tablet, not out of spite, but as a reminder of what happened to people who thought they could prey on kids and get away with it. These days, our morning routine looked pretty much the same as it always had. Ruby ate her cereal. I made breakfast and packed her lunch. We talked about homework and school projects and normal 10-year-old stuff. But there was something different now, a confidence in both of us that hadn't been there before, a sense that we could handle whatever came our way. Every morning, after I walked her to the bus stop, I'd tell her the same thing. I'm so proud of you, Ruby girl. And every morning, she'd grin at me with that same mischievous smile she'd had since she was 2 years old and reply, I told you I handled it, Dad. She was still just 10, still loved cartoons and chocolate milk, still needed help with her math homework, still slept with Mr. Buttons when thunderstorms scared her at night. But she was also the girl who'd saved our family, exposed financial predators, and built a network that had helped hundreds of kids across the country fight back against the adults who'd betrayed them. Not a bad legacy for someone who hadn't even hit middle school yet.